Hello, everyone. I'm back here with Justin. We're going to keep reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? We're doing chapters 3 and 4 today. So, yeah, again, anyone who wants to read along, I'll have the PDF in the description. But, yeah. I guess these two chapters is there's nothing on it's all on Rick Deckard. There's nothing on the guy from the second chapter, which I was kind of disappointed about. I wanted to see more of him. But I was hoping like we would at least get some of him, but I'm sure we'll get him soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rick is kind of the main character. What was his name again? I'm blanking on it. John. Yeah, John Isidore.
Oh yeah.
Like their narratives kind of coalesce later on, but
okay.
John Isidore is kind of like a main side character.
Gotcha.
I guess you put it. So.
But anyway, these two chapters focus on Rick's employment as he works for San Francisco Police Department, I'm pretty sure. And
yeah, and more or less.
He does he chases down escaped Andes and kills them, or like rogue Andes as far as I can tell.
Yeah, ones that have come to Earth for whatever reason. Because androids, at least humanoid androids, aren't supposed to be on Earth. Mm-hmm. They're manufactured on Mars, and they're not legally allowed to be on Earth.
Okay. And so that's just the way their way of cordoning them off, so that when you're on Earth, if they have this issue with, oh well, you can't tell who an android is, who a human is, if they make that a law, then supposedly if the law is enforced properly, you can trust that whoever you're with on Earth is a human, so then it makes an advantage to living on Earth. But then what does that have to do with them trying to get everyone to emigrate to Mars?
I think they might have outlawed androids on Earth at the very least, because they're kind of a tool to help colonize other planets for humanity. So if you have them on Earth, possibly making people's lives easier, they won't be as willing to leave. So that might be a reason, but
I don't know. But
yeah, there's some setups for the book that are a little odd, to say the least, because it's definitely not really an analogy for like illegal immigration, for instance.
Yeah.
So you could draw those comparisons fairly easy, but it's not there for the themes of the novel, really.
It's not exactly the same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but he chases them down, and they start talking about the Nexus 6 brain unit, which is, I guess, the brain unit that makes Andes much closer to humans. And it's unclear whether or not they're able to feel empathy. That's kind of their issue, is they can't tell if they're able to feel it or if they're able to simulate it, right?
Mimic.
Yeah, or mimic it, which is what's difficult about it. And in a sense, that's almost like one of the major themes of the book is what matters more. Is it the actual feeling of something, or is it the mimicking of it? It's like the electric sheep versus a real sheep, right? The fact that the electric sheep is mimicking it, is that a problem? And the emotion machine, what was that called? I forget. It's not the that's something else.
I wrote it down. Mood organ.
Yeah, that are those emotions real, or are they mimicked happiness, or even mimicked sadness? Right? So, yeah. And I guess it's his job to hunt these down. And and then he starts this whole section. He starts to go into the philosophy of things. So maybe let me just read this larger section here, because I think it's probably important just to read this section on kind of the philosophy of the whole thing. And then he gets into the religion too. So I'll just read it out loud. The Nexus 6 android types, Rick reflected, surpassed several classes of human specials in terms of intelligence. In other words, androids equipped with the new Nexus 6 brain unit had, from a sort of rough, pragmatic, no-nonsense standpoint, evolved beyond a major, but inferior segment of mankind. For better or worse, the servant had in some cases become more adroit than its master, but new scales of achievement, for example, the Voight-Kampf empathy tests, had emerged as criteria by which to judge. An android, no matter how gifted as to pure intellectual capacity, could make no sense out of the fusion which took place routinely among the followers of Mercerism, an experience which he and virtually everyone else, including subnormal chickenheads, managed with no difficulty. He had wondered, as had most people at one time or another, precisely why an android bounced helplessly about when confronted by an empathy measuring test. Empathy, evidently, existed only within the human community, whereas intelligence to some degree could be found throughout every phylum and order, including the arachnids. For one thing, the empathic faculty probably required an unimpaired group instinct. A solitary organism, such as a spider, would have no use for it. In fact, it would tend to abhor a spider's ability to survive. It would make him conscious of the desire to live on the part of his prey. But hence all predators, with even highly developed mammals such as cats, would starve. Empathy, he once had decided, must be limited to herbivores or anyhow omnivores who could depart from a meat diet. Because ultimately the empathic gift blurred the boundaries between hunter and victim, between the successful and the defeated. As in the fusion with Mercer, everyone ascended together, or, when the cycle had come to an end, fell together into the trough of the tomb world. Oddly, it resembled a sort of biological insurance, but double-edged. As long as some creature experienced joy, then the condition for all other creatures included a fragment of joy. However, if any living being suffered, then for all the rest of the shadow could not be entirely cast off. A herd animal such as man would acquire a higher survival factor through this. An owl or a cobra would be destroyed. That's very interesting. Yet evidently, the humanoid robot constituted a solitary predator. So I've been thinking a lot about, like, thinking especially the church and all of humanity as a body, and what it would mean for it to be a body and for the different parts of the body to integrate with one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, if these situations where it's proper for some animals to not feel empathy is like a one-way valve of feeling almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I get your meaning.
So like if humans both feel empathy, humans properly feel empathy for one another so that they can stick together better, and they form their purpose better stuck together. Humans do. Whereas lions don't serve their purpose better by sympathizing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a one-way valve for care in those situations. So then if there's a little bit of unbalance, then the whole thing becomes unbalanced. So if one human doesn't care about others, then there's unbalance and the whole thing falls apart. And so Andes would be, if they properly can't feel empathy, then they would sneak in and it would destroy, and you couldn't tell the difference between an Andy and a human, then it would destroy humanity from the inside. But this is something I just noticed too, is I haven't, all that I've seen is them going, oh, well, Andes, they can't feel empathy, so we've got to get rid of them. But I haven't actually seen any Andes do anything bad yet. You know?
Well, we haven't really been introduced to any yet,
That's true.
Either or anyhow.
At this point, all I've seen is speculation about, and it makes sense, speculation that makes sense. It's like they're a psychopath or something, you know?
Yeah. When I was kind of reading that section myself, I was kind of bouncing back between the opinion that either Philip K. Dick is giving too much credit to humans for their empathetic capacity, or too little credit to animals. But I think I kind of ended up settling that he might be giving humans a little too much credit for being empathetic in some circumstances, at least.
Yeah.
Because I came to that conclusion because even though you might see animals have some amount of empathy, but that's mostly in kind of like a domesticated setting. but out in the wild you'll see like lions and like type polar bears just like eat their own young if they're a hindrance to their survival, or if they're the young of another. I think it's polar bears that have only been seen to eat their own progeny, where with like lions, like if a if like a male lion is thrown out of a like a pride or whatever the group of lions is called,
Mm-hmm.
then the new usurping lion will kill off all the progeny of the lion that he just dethroned. And I think there's probably similar things like that in different or in kind of more predatory uh, species of animals.
Yeah, that's like what he talks about with carnivores and herbivores. But
Hmm.
yeah, like, do you see any of that kind of phenomena in herbivores? Probably not. And you see it sometimes in humans, but we're omnivores. But I mean, it's not obvious that, like, wolves operate in packs. So I'd imagine that wolves feel empathy at least for one another,
Hmm.
right?
Like I think it's to limiting degrees. Like it might be whatever is currently benefiting the most, and then even within like wolf packs, there's like social hierarchies. So is it necessarily empathy, or is it just the like preservation of your own existence that's making you seem empathetic?
Yeah, that's a big thing in econ, where it's like, what? Oh well, we trade to get, like, we think of the economy as everyone is benefiting everybody else, and like when I go
Hmm.
and do my job, or when I go and like produce something, am I thinking, man, I love producing for other people, or am I thinking, oh, I'm getting a paycheck, right? And I think a big part of it is that this is a big thing in Adam Smith, is that it's much easier to sympathize with things that are close to you.
Hmm.
So even if it's not conscious that I'm like helping other people by producing, like that they benefit from the fact that I'm producing even for a paycheck, right? It's not like I feel negatively towards them. It's just I might miss what, if the incentives are not aligned properly. Usually economists use the word incentive, but interest also works. And interest is like a psychological thing, like where is your attention pointed? Because you've got all this mental energy, so where is it pointed? And then different things are going to excite your attention and excite your interest. So you kind of, the way that you have a larger body, even if you don't like actively feel for the other people in the system, you might understand that by doing your little part and just live, maybe you empathize more directly with your family members and your neighbors and your closer friends, but you understand that as long as you operate within certain boundaries, like you don't go around killing strangers, you're properly helping the whole grow.
Hmm.
And
I think there's like I forget if it's just basic economics that has this theory, or if this is more of a Randian type school idea that everybody is like self-interested and everybody works off of their own self-interest, and that's often misinterpreted as everyone is inherently greedy. But it's like, well, you like we all do things that are kind of for our own benefit that might benefit others.
yeah, and I mean, that's very popular in Randian things, but for her, it's like a completely different kind of thing. Like, she has a book called The Virtue of Selfishness.
Hmm.
To her, it's a very important ethical thing, where she actually does have a distinction between like being selfish and being altruistic. And she thinks altruism is evil because it's irrational. So like the fact that she'll be like, only individuals exist and they exist for the purpose of themselves. I might be wrong on like the technicalities of her philosophy, but
Yeah,
for her
but
it's very much like be selfish in a bad way. But in general econ, like you were saying, yeah, we have the term that everyone is self-interested, which self-interest is a better term, in that it's much more automatic, in that you are interested by whatever you are interested in. That's all it really means. It's really a tautology. It doesn't mean as much as people think it means, but it's important to point out in that that's kind of the joint by which we act. Whatever you're interested in, you act upon. So you might be interested in altruistic things, and you might be interested in greedy things. So if you decide to, like, you can say something like, oh, well, when I help you, I feel good. So actually no one wants to help anyone else. They just want to feel good themselves. I mean, at some point when you start to empathize, I think you actually blur the boundaries between it being two different people. So if your pain becomes my pain and your pleasure becomes my pleasure, then I might as well be like a second one of your arms.
Yeah.
Just
And
the
we
fact
do
that our
kind of,
brains are separate doesn't mean we're different people. That's what a marriage is.
yeah. I mean, I do think that we kind of reflect the emotions of the people that are kind of around us.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be happy, you'll find yourself surrounding yourself with people who are happy,
Yeah.
or pretending to be at the very least.
Yeah.
There was also kind of the exception that was mentioned in the book about
Mm-hmm.
that you shall, like, from the Mercerism religion or philosophy, that you shall only kill the killers, but apparently that designation had like grown and grown over the years of what exactly they saw as a killer.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like a weird little section, and maybe it was kind of talking about um, kind of the decreasing or kind of losing empathetic capabilities, because if you are killing killers, then you kind of become a killer yourself in a sense.
Yeah. And I mean, now so let me read that paragraph too, just so we're clear on what the killers are. So, okay, it's right after the section that I had just read too. Rick liked to think of them that way. It made his job palatable. In retiring, for example, killing, and Andy, oh, no, that doesn't mean for example, i.e. What does i.e. mean? Whatever. In
I think
retiring,
it's Latin.
yeah, yeah, or okay, so it's something like Latin. In retiring, killing, and Andy, he did not violate the rule of life laid down by Mercer. You shall kill only the killers. Mercer had told them the year empathy boxies first appeared on Earth. And in Mercerism, as it evolved into a full theology, the concept of the killers had grown insidiously. In Mercerism, an absolute evil plucked at the threadbare cloak of the tottering, ascending old man, but it was never clear who or what this evil presence was. A Mercerite sensed evil without understanding it. Put another way, a Mercerite was free to locate the nebulous presence of the killers whenever he saw fit. For Rick Deckard, an escaped humanoid robot, which had killed its master, which had been equipped with an intelligence greater than that of many human beings, which had no regard for animals, which possessed no ability to feel empathic joy for another life's form, success, or grief at its defeat, that for him epitomized the killers. So I guess and yeah, you're right when you say when he kills the killers does not make him a killer too. I think that's pointing at the downside of over empathy within a certain group, is that you become more unempathetic to things outside the group. And
Mm-hmm.
not only, and empathy is not just like, oh, you care about them, you'll do nice things for them. It's also like understanding them too.
Yeah.
So in in Adam Smith again, he doesn't use the word emotion almost ever. He uses the word sentiment, which is like an emotion wrapped up with a belief or an understanding of something. So when you have sentiments for things, you have like sort of like you have a grasp on it that like is very close to you somehow.
Yeah, it's like a feeling with some understanding.
Yeah, like intimacy. You have when we say people have intimate knowledge of something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I mean we haven't gotten to the rest of the book yet, so I don't know what the Andes are actually like. But my suspicion is that they're not as bad as people are making them out to be. We'll see, and then, or at least that there's some kind of misunderstanding between the two groups. I keep thinking of the word understanding, and then I want to know the etymology of it. I'm going to look that up right now. Etymology of the word understanding.
Oh, I did look up IE, and it is Latin for id est, which means that is.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So
Oh, that is.
that's all.
Oh,
Yeah,
so it's like saying that is. Okay, I got it now.
it's an abbreviated Latin phrase that in itself is incredibly short. That
Yeah,
just means that is,
yeah.
because we want to sound smart.
They should just say that is, yeah.
But if you say that is a bunch of times, you're going to have your like English teacher complaining to you that you're repeating the same phrase over and over again. Then you're like, fine,
Yeah.
IE then.
Okay, let's move to the next section. And he calls the dog shop or whatever, or the pet
Yeah.
shop, because he sees an ostrich that he wants to buy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he went out on break. Thinking about the animals reminded him of the ostrich he had seen in the pet store. So yeah, then he called the pet store and was asking about the ostrich he saw in the display on his way to work and was trying to haggle to buy it
Mm-hmm.
because Deckard's still kind of wrapped up with the wanting to take care of an animal.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of explored in the last chapter or the first chapter.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me mostly the same stuff. Like he just wants the real animal, and then he wants, yeah.
Yeah, not too much to get into that we haven't already talked about.
Yeah. And then did they say the thing yet about his coworker dying?
I thought he was just hospitalized, or
Right.
did I
Oh, okay. Yeah.
did I misread that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's another thing that happens. One of his coworkers died. That's a plot thing that happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the next chapter, he talks to his boss, and his boss is quite intense, from what I remember.
Yeah.
And I guess he's kind of getting promoted because his friend is now in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's getting put on to do a new mission, and he's supposed to go to the Rosen organization, which is the people who produce the androids.
Yes.
Yeah. And hmm. Yeah. And this is when he gets in, and it feels like I don't know what to think of these android companies. So, and I'm not clear on whether or not, because clearly the androids are like a major political um, issue. So I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
there's some kind of cry to I guess he's kind of doing like regulatory oversight on them or something like that, right?
Well, he was going to the company to see if the test that they have for detecting androids actually works or not, because they had recently upgraded the hardware of the androids, as we mentioned, with the brain unit.
Mm-hmm.
So they become harder to detect
Mm-hmm.
with the Voight empathy test that we kind of didn't mention. And it's just kind of like a series of questions and that are supposed to get an emotional reaction out of a person. So the test kind of measures how much of a reaction a person is having to said evocative questions.
Mm-hmm. That's the Voight comp test.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Voight Kampf test is the slightly modified version of the Voight empathy test.
Mm-hmm.
That was modified to have better detection, but they're not entirely sure of how well it actually works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the when he gets in, he notices they have like a raccoon and an owl.
Yeah, they have a little zoo of rare animals.
Yeah, and so he goes, a major manufacturer of androids, he said thoughtfully, invests its surplus capital on living animals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even these people who are supposedly supposed to be touting the benefits of having androids, you know,
They still see they still see the value of living creatures and the uniqueness and kind of that they're not necessary. They supposedly, because like we still haven't seen the androids, so we can't really say if the androids are fully mechanical. Well, mechanical in the sense that they don't really have a will of their own. That a living being might have more will for themselves than an android might. So that's why they might be more valuable to possess.
Yeah.
This chapter also brings up that that people with mental disorders like schizophrenia might not necessarily have the same reactions as a regular human would have to the Voight-Kampf test. So they might be a false positive for an android.
Yeah, exactly.
But then they kind of try to minimalize that as much as they can, because all the people with mental disorders are supposed to be institutionalized in a mental hospital.
Yeah, so I guess the success of the test is like the real question here. Is there a difference between humans and androids? Well, if the test can do something, if the test can is reliable, you know, then it's a good thing. Then or that there is some kind of truth here. It's almost like a science. It's like a metaphysical science experiment. Are humans and androids the same thing? Do they both have souls? Well, we'll do this experiment and find out.
Yeah, like currently we're still kind of in the stage of wondering, what is it they call it, that when AI becomes self-aware?
The singularity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the singularity is the point past which, if that thing is created, there's no going back. Like you can't undo it. And they say we've passed that already, but I don't know anything about this. I'm not particularly worried by AI. It just never caught on to me as like a thing I'm supposed to be worried about. I don't know.
You haven't watched enough Terminator movies.
I haven't watched any, so. Yeah. But so the whole time he's going through the facility with this woman, Rachel, who represents the company, right? And then towards the end of the chapter, something really, he's talking to Eldon Rosen, who I guess is her uncle, and then he basically says, oh, this woman was the test, right?
Or he says that, I don't want to get too
It's
far
right at the end.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through the PDF. I went too far. I'm in chapter, wait, we're supposed to be in 5.
Page 19.
No. Okay. Yeah, yeah. He says we selected her as your first test subject. She may be an android. We're hoping you can tell.
Yeah.
So like that's where the test really begins. Like it was just kind of because I don't think that whole thing was technically the test. I mean, it might be part of it, or it could be part of it.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't she? Well, okay, wait. Yeah. So we don't know if she's a human or an android, but they're asking him right now, what do you think? Right? And in the whole chapter, she seemed, well, I don't know, I'm not looking at her, so she seemed normal.
Yeah. There was a bit where she was kind of standoffish because Rick kind of has the power to completely change the direction of their business at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's determined that it is impossible to tell the difference between an Android with the Nexus 6 unit as its processor,
Mm-hmm.
then they would apparently have to take that off the market and completely change their production. So the company stands to lose a lot of money if the outcome of this test is that they are indistinguishable.
And they stand to lose money if the test doesn't work,
Yes.
because then they wouldn't be allowed to produce them.
That's kind of what I read into the
Okay.
chapter.
Okay, I see. So you're saying that that if she's an android, she would want the test to succeed so that she would have been coded to make the test succeed.
Well, we don't know if the book hasn't really explained androids enough to really know if they have prime directives per se.
Oh, that's true.
But that's kind of assuming that she is an android, but in general, if she wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
Any employee wouldn't want their company to completely have to upend their manufacturing.
Yeah, because of the android. So that's why they want to produce a workable test. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. And I also realized that if this android is that realistic, it seems way more realistic than like the electric sheep was. So androids are probably like wildly expensive.
Yeah, I don't know if the book ever mentions what they would the cost of one would be.
Mm-hmm. Or how
Um,
they're produced even.
but I think the sheep is realistic enough because it at least fooled his neighbor for a decently long period of time.
Sure.
But yeah, these chapters were a little sparse for detail
Mm-hmm.
to talk about because I feel like we're both kind of struggling to find things to talk about at the time.
Oh, well,
Right
that
now.
philosophy, the fact that he goes straight into that flow, I had already been suspecting that it's going to be some kind of empathy issue, but
Mm-hmm.
the fact that he laid all that out, that stuff is super cool. Yeah, yeah. I don't read nearly enough fiction, like at all. I guess I've watched shows and stuff, but only in the past like year and a half have I started to like actually make myself read more fiction. So I reread Lord of the Rings, and then I read 2.5 Dune books, and then I read the Silmarillion finally. So yeah.
Yeah, the thing about fiction is that there's a lot of garbage to shift through to actually find things that are worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true of a lot of media in general.
Sure. Sure. But yeah, okay. That's 2 chapters. And next time we'll do 5, 6, maybe 7. We'll see how long it is. So
Yeah. Or if there's not enough to discuss, we might extend it.
yeah. Okay. Well, very good. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.